I'm going to pull a Kathy Pratt and just stand right out front here. So as Lee mentioned, we're looking at transforming the future of autism. So just a little bit about me. Things were pretty typical for me at first. At 24 hours of age, my wife says I looked like an egg. But then, what many people refer currently to as the autism bomb struck at 18 months, with a loss of functional communication, tantrums, and various other characteristics of being on the autism spectrum. What do I see in the future? Well, we have a lot of research now indicating that we can determine, have a good suggestion that someone is going to be on the autism spectrum earlier than 18 months, 12 months. Sometimes I see 6 months. So if that becomes the standard, that'll be a great way to transform things. And to transform things for people not on the autism spectrum, not looking at it as eliminating autism, but looking at autism not as a bomb at all, but more as a different way of being, rather than a disordered way of being. So what did my parents do? There were no resources. There was no Autism Society of America. Autism was blamed on poor parenting, refrigerator mothers. We all know that story all too well. Now we will look at autism as a different way of being. Instead of my parents being told to send me off to an institution, they had never seen a child who was so sick, there would be, as David Holmes often mentions, fair, free, appropriate, individual resources for people on the autism spectrum. And in that way, my parents would know what to do instead of having to fly by the seat of their pants. And they figured out what needed to be done. They provided what we would today refer to as an intensive, home-based early intervention program, emphasizing music, movement, sensory integration, narration, and imitation. Probably something that looked more like a developmental, cognitive, or affective approach. Which brings me to mind what was mentioned about insurance just a few moments ago, and that there being no coding for applied behavioral analysis. I think one thing that we may want to consider is coding for intensive behavioral intervention. Because as many of the panelists had mentioned, with the great diversity of people on the autism spectrum, that's going to mean that different people need different types of interventions. And ABA will help a whole bunch of people. And other people may do better with other promising approaches, such as the Miller method, TEACH, floor time, and a whole host of others. I found out about being on the autism spectrum at 5 years of age. I was lucky. My parents used the word autism in the house just like any other word. So by around age 5, when my speech had pretty much normalized, I knew I had this thing called autism. We didn't know much about what it was, but it certainly helped explain an awful lot of differences. And to that end, I would like to see, as Lee has mentioned a number of times, that in the future, autism becomes an accepted part of the human condition. That we look at autism as a set of characteristics. People with dark hair have a certain set of characteristics. People who have elongated eyeballs have other characteristics, such as being nearsighted. And with all of the research, awareness, and interventions that we have, we can help people with autism lead fulfilling and productive lives with their characteristics, as opposed to trying to remove them. We fast forward. One of these days when I become an adult, I'll figure out what I want to do. But anyways, college was a utopia for me. If I wanted to ride my bicycle at midnight, I could find someone just as strange as I was to also ride at midnight. College, that's where I met my wife. She accepts me for who I am. And that's what I'd like to see in the future. People accepted for who they are. But at the same time, we do have to help. We're ethically, morally, and there's probably all kinds of other reasons why we are bound to help people on the autism spectrum. We have a child on the spectrum who, due to biomedical issues, has not pooped. Well, sorry. I know many people just had breakfast. But they haven't done their thing for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Are they ready to learn? Do we have to help them? What about the child who has not developed a meaningful or reliable means of communication with others? Yeah, we got to do something about that. That's what we are all here working to figure out. So there's my wife. We've been married for a little over 19 years. I'm not sure how she puts up with me, but she does. And as we look to the future, I think about how I was hired as a professor of special education at Adelphi University. Now, a lot of us on the autism spectrum, we spend a lot of time talking about proper advocacy, proper disclosure. How do we tell somebody else that we're on the autism spectrum? And how do we do the fancy tap dance around convincing people that, well, it would be a good idea to hire one of us, and here's one of the following reasons. Well, at Adelphi University, I was quite surprised when they approached me, asking me if I'd teach at their university, focusing on special education and autism. And it was incredibly refreshing to go into that interview knowing that they had already done the research and that I was hired because of my abilities, because of being on the autism spectrum, as opposed to in spite of being on the autism spectrum. And that's an important difference that I would like to see, or that we will see in the future. Martha, Lee, Kathy, and in some way we've all talked about the idea that we're shifting from the current model of emphasizing a collection of deficits to an appreciation of strengths of people on the autism spectrum. And that's how everybody is treated. Thank you very much.